In front of a screaming live audience, Barron Trump sat confidently praising his perfect parents until Andy Cohen slammed his hand on the table, flashed a cold smirk, and unleashed the brutal truth that blew the Trump family apart. The woman Barron had loved and defended his entire life wasn't his real mother at all. Ivanka was. This wasn't just another episode of Andy Cohen's famous dinner show. It was a special live taping in New York City, packed with a rowdy studio audience and millions watching from home. Everyone knew the Trump name carried heavy baggage, power, controversy, and endless rumors that had followed the family like shadows for years. But the biggest rumor of all, the one that had been swirling quietly in dark corners of the internet for a long time, was about Barron's real mother. People had been speculating whether Melania was truly his biological mom, or whether something much darker was hidden behind the perfect family portrait the Trumps had been selling to the world. The studio was buzzing. You could feel the electricity the second you walked through the doors. People were leaning toward each other, whispering fast, eyes wide with that dangerous mixture of excitement and gossip. The name Trump always did that to a crowd, but tonight it felt heavier than usual. Everyone knew Barron Trump, Melania, and Ivanka were about to sit down with Andy Cohen, and nobody expected it to stay polite for long. Phones were already out, recording before the cameras had even started rolling. The air crackled with anticipation, like the seconds before a thunderstorm splits the sky. Then the side door opened. Barron walked in first, tall, composed, moving with a quiet confidence that made him look older than his years. Melania followed right behind, elegant as always, her face calm, but her eyes scanning the room like a woman who had learned long ago to prepare for ambush before it arrived. Ivanka came in last, flashing that perfect, practiced smile. But if you looked closely, really closely, you could see it. She was already on guard. Her shoulders carried tension, the way walls carry weight. Something behind those eyes was bracing for impact. Barron felt every single pair of eyes in the room land on him the moment he stepped onto the stage. This wasn't just another interview. He took a slow breath, straightened his shoulders, and told himself he could handle whatever came next. Andy Cohen bounced onto the stage with his usual big grin and easy swagger. The audience cheered loud as he waved and cracked a quick joke about how the Trumps always knew how to make an entrance. But the second the laughter died down, he looked straight at Barron and said, with a smirk that carried just a little too much edge, "So Barron, glad you could join us tonight. We've got your mom and your sister here too. Hope everyone's ready to keep it real." The way he said, "keep it real," wasn't casual. It was a test. A finger pressed lightly against a bruise to see who flinched first. Barron caught it immediately. So did Ivanka. She shifted in her seat, but the smile stayed locked in place like armor bolted to her face. Andy didn't waste time on pleasantries. He leaned forward, that same calm smile still in place, and turned to Barron with a question that felt like a lit match tossed into a room full of gasoline. "Let me ask you something directly, Barron. There's been talk online, a lot of talk, about whether Melania is really your biological mother. What do you say to that?" Barron sat there frozen. His mouth opened slightly, like the words had punched him square in the chest. For one long second, the entire studio held its breath with him. Then Ivanka shot up from her chair so fast it scraped loudly against the floor. Her face turned red with fury as she pointed straight at Andy Cohen. "How dare you ask something so stupid?" she yelled, her voice sharp enough to crack glass. "That's my brother you're talking to. Show some respect." The audience exploded. Gasps and shocked whispers filled the air like sparks from a fire. Some people looked thrilled, others looked deeply uncomfortable. But every single person in that room was locked in now. Barron pulled himself together fast. He raised his hand slightly toward Ivanka, signaling her to sit down, then turned back to Andy with a voice that was calm but hard as concrete. "Melania is my mom," he said clearly, each word firm and deliberate. "She's always been my mom. There's no question about that." His eyes didn't waver. He sounded like a man stating a fact that the universe itself had no right to challenge. Andy didn't flinch. He leaned back, still wearing that relaxed smile, and shrugged like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Hey, people want the truth these days. Why not clear it up with a DNA test, right here? From your side?" The second he said DNA test, the crowd lost its mind. People started shouting, some yelling, "Do it," while others booed and called it disrespectful. The studio turned into pure chaos. Phones were shaking as people recorded, the energy flipping from surprise to wildfire in seconds. Barron could feel his heart slamming against his ribs, but he kept his face straight, refusing to let the noise rattle him. In that split second of madness, a memory flashed through Barron's mind, quick and uninvited. He was little, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on the edge of a big bed while Ivanka helped him tie his shoes. She had been the one reading him bedtime stories more than anyone else. She took him to the park when his parents were busy. She always seemed to know exactly what he needed before he even asked for it. The memory felt warm at first, but now it hit different. Too close. Too much. Why had Ivanka always stepped in like that? The thought lasted less than 2 seconds, but it left a strange, cold twist in his stomach that he couldn't shake. Andy Cohen didn't let the moment breathe. He turned his head slowly toward Melania, that calm smile still glued to his face, but his eyes digging in like a man who already knew the answer to every question he was about to ask. "Why are you so quiet over there, Melania?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Then he shifted his gaze to Ivanka, without missing a beat. "And you? Why do you keep jumping in every time I ask Barron about his mom? What exactly are you two hiding?" The questions dropped heavy into the room. You could hear chairs creak as people leaned forward. The crowd that had been roaring just seconds ago went quiet, sensing blood in the water. Ivanka exploded before Melania could even open her mouth. She leaned across the table, pointing at Andy like a weapon. "This is ridiculous. You're attacking a teenage boy on live television. Back off." Her voice was sharp and fast, cutting through the air like she was trying to shut the entire conversation down by sheer force. She kept going, barely pausing for breath. "Barron came here to talk about school and normal stuff, not to deal with your stupid rumors." Every time Andy tried to speak, Ivanka jumped right back in, her words overlapping his, turning the stage into a battlefield of interruptions. Finally, Melania spoke. Her voice was soft, almost too controlled, like she had practiced the line 100 times in front of a mirror. "Barron is my son," she said slowly. "That's all there is to it." But something about the way she said it made the air in the room change. It was too flat, too careful, missing any real warmth or fire. No emotion, no fierce defense. Just words hanging there, empty and hollow, like a picture frame with nothing inside it. The entire studio went dead silent. The energy from earlier had completely vanished. People stared, some frowning, others exchanging confused glances. That one short sentence from Melania created a heavier tension than all of Ivanka's shouting combined. You could feel the shift, like every person in the room was thinking the same unspoken thought. Why didn't that sound right? Barron couldn't take it anymore. He sat up straight, shoulders squared, and raised his hand to stop Ivanka from cutting in again. "Let me talk," he said, his voice firm and clear, cutting through the silence like a blade. He looked Andy straight in the eyes. "These rumors have been around for years, but they don't hold up. I was born in 2006. My mother was there from the very first day. There are birth records, hospital documents, family photos. Everything proves it. People who push this stuff are just chasing clicks and drama. It's not true, and it's not fair to drag my family through it on national television." His words came out sharp and logical, one after another, like ammunition loaded with precision. A few people in the audience clapped. Most stayed quiet, hanging on every syllable. Right then, Ivanka slipped. She was still fired up, breathing hard, and the words tumbled out before she could catch them. "Barron is not your problem," she snapped at Andy, her tone way too intense, way too personal, way too loaded. The second the sentence left her mouth, the air in the room shifted. It wasn't just a protective big sister line. It sounded deeper, like she was guarding something much bigger than a simple rumor, like a door had cracked open and the wrong thing had slipped through. Barron froze. He turned his head slowly and really looked at her in a way he hadn't before. That phrase kept ringing in his ears. Why did she say it like that? Why did her voice crack with so much fear and anger? For the first time that night, a strange, cold feeling settled deep in his chest. Something felt wrong, really wrong, and he couldn't shake it no matter how hard he tried. Andy leaned back in his chair, still smiling. That same relaxed, knowing smile. But his eyes were bright with satisfaction. He didn't push harder right away. He just let the silence sit there, thick and uncomfortable, while the audience processed what had just happened. Barron's mind was spinning now. The logical answers he had given felt weaker against that one slip from Ivanka. Melania's quiet, hollow response still echoed in his head. The pressure in the room kept building, and those first cracks in the family story were spreading wider than anyone expected. Barron had heard enough. He sat forward, eyes locked on Andy, and fired back without waiting for another question. "Why are you really doing this?" he demanded, his voice strong and direct. "You invited us here to talk about my life, my school, my future, but instead you're throwing out wild rumors and attacking my family. What's your angle? Ratings? Or do you just like tearing people down on live television?" Andy raised an eyebrow, still calm, but clearly he hadn't expected the kid to push this hard. Before he could respond, he reached under the table and pulled out a small folder. He opened it slowly and slid 2 large photographs across the table toward Barron. "Let's look at the facts then," Andy said. Here's a family photo from 2005. Your dad, Melania, and Ivanka all together at an event. Melania doesn't look pregnant at all. And here's another from early 2006, right before you were supposedly born. The timeline doesn't add up. Ivanka is standing right next to your dad in almost every shot during that period, acting more like a partner than a sister. The photos appeared sharp and clear on the giant screens behind them. The audience started murmuring loudly as the images zoomed in. The room split down the middle instantly. One side erupted in loud boos and shouts of, "That's fake news," while the other side clapped and cheered, "Show the truth," and "DNA test now." People stood up in some rows, arguing with strangers across the aisles. The noise grew into full chaos. Clapping mixed with jeers, phones flashing everywhere, the energy turning wild and dangerous. Security stepped closer to the stage. Barron stared at the photos, his face tight, feeling the weight of every eye in the room crushing down on him. For a short moment, his emotions boiled over, his fists clenched under the table, and his voice cracked as he slammed his hand down hard. "This is bullshit," he burst out, louder than he meant to. The word hung in the air, raw and real. His chest rose and fell fast. The audience gasped at the sudden outburst from the usually composed teenager. But just as quickly as it came, Barron pulled it back. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and looked Andy dead in the eyes. His voice dropped back to that steady, determined tone. "If you're so sure, then prove it right here. Don't hide behind old pictures and vague timelines. Show real proof or stop wasting everyone's time." The challenge landed heavy as stone. Barron didn't blink. He had thrown the ball back into Andy's court, daring him to go further. The studio was still loud and divided, but the tension had turned electric. Everyone waited to see whether Andy would back down or drop something even bigger. Then, Andy Cohen leaned forward. His smile was gone. In its place sat a cold, steady stare that felt like a door slamming shut on every exit in the room. "Your real mom is Ivanka," he said flatly. His voice cut through the noise like a blade through paper. "Face it, Barron, Melania didn't give birth to you. Ivanka did." The words hit the studio like a detonation. Gasps exploded from every corner. People covered their mouths. Some shouted in disbelief. The entire audience seemed to freeze for one long, horrifying second, as though time itself had tripped and fallen. Before Barron could even process what he had just heard, Andy grabbed a thick folder from beside his chair and shoved it hard across the table. The papers slid right in front of Barron with a loud slap that echoed through the silence. "Here. Read it yourself," Andy said, his tone calm but deadly serious. "Hospital records, blood type mismatches, private medical notes from the time of your birth. They all point in the same direction. Ivanka is your biological mother." The giant screens behind them lit up with scanned documents, dates, signatures, highlighted sections that made the claim look terrifyingly real. The room erupted again, louder than before, louder than anything that had come before it all night. Barron's hand shook as he grabbed the folder. His eyes scanned the pages, fast at first, then slower, reading every line. His face went pale. The room started spinning around him. His breathing got shallow and fast, like a man whose lungs had suddenly forgotten how to work. For a moment, it looked like he was about to collapse. His shoulders slumped. His eyes widened with pure, unfiltered shock. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The papers felt heavy in his hands. Heavy as stones, heavy as years of lies stacked on top of each other. Everything he thought he knew about his life was cracking apart right there on live television. Then something snapped inside him. Barron slammed the folder down on the table and shot up from his chair, standing tall, facing Andy directly. His voice came out raw and broken. "You're lying. This can't be real." At that exact moment, Ivanka exploded into action. She jumped up so fast, her chair flew backward and crashed to the floor with a sound that cracked through the studio like a gunshot. "We're done here," she screamed, her face twisted with panic and rage. She lunged toward Barron, grabbing his arm hard and yanking him toward the exit. "Come on, Barron, we're leaving right now." Melania stood up too, looking completely overwhelmed. Her usual elegant composure shattered into 1,000 visible pieces. Ivanka grabbed Melania's wrist with her other hand and started pulling both of them toward the side of the stage. The movement was physical, messy, desperate. Barron tried to pull away, still staring at Andy, but Ivanka's grip was tight and frantic. Security guards moved in quickly, unsure whether to stop them or clear the path. The audience was on their feet now, shouting, some cheering the drama, others booing the sudden exit. Cameras swung wildly to follow the chaos as Ivanka dragged her family toward the wings, her voice still screaming, "Don't listen to him! This is all..." Barron kept looking back over his shoulder, at the table, at the papers, at Andy's calm, unflinching face. His heart was hammering so hard he could barely form a thought. Andy Cohen wasn't about to let them walk away. While Ivanka was still yanking Barron's arm and dragging Melania toward the exit, he raised his hand and signaled the control room with a quick nod. "Wait just a second," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like nothing had happened. "Before you all storm off stage, let's show the audience what this conversation is really about." The giant screens lit up instantly, the studio lights dimmed slightly, and the first old clip started playing. It was Donald Trump on a talk show from years ago, laughing loudly as he looked straight into the camera. "If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her," he said with a wide grin. The audience gasped, loud and sharp. Some people actually covered their mouths in shock. Then came the second clip. Worse. Trump was smiling wide, talking about his own daughter like she was a prize to be displayed. The crude words echoed through the entire studio. The room went dead quiet for half a second, then erupted. People were shouting. The clips weren't long, but they felt endless. Everyone in the audience was staring at the screens, then back at the Trump family on stage, the shock written across their faces like ink that couldn't be wiped away. Barron stood frozen, eyes glued to the giant screens, his stomach twisted into a knot so tight it hurt to breathe. He had heard rumors about his father's old comments before, but seeing and hearing them like this, in front of a live crowd, with the papers still warm on the table behind him, hit completely different. Ivanka's grip on his arm tightened painfully, but he barely noticed. Melania looked pale as paper, her usual calm mask cracking in real time in front of the entire country. Before the crowd could even catch its breath, Andy hit another button. A screen on the right side of the stage switched to a live video call. A middle-aged woman with short brown hair appeared. She looked nervous, but spoke clearly. "My name is Linda Harper," she said. "I worked as a nanny and personal assistant for the Trump family from 2004 to 2008. I was inside the house when Barron was born." The studio got even quieter. Linda continued, her voice steady now. "Ivanka was the one who stayed in the private wing with the baby for the first several weeks. She was feeding him, changing him, rocking him to sleep at night. Melania was barely around during that time. I remember Ivanka arguing with the doctors about Barron's care, like she was the real mother. They told the public it was all Melania, but behind closed doors, it was Ivanka doing everything a new mom would do." The revelation hit like a second bomb. The audience lost it completely. People started yelling from every direction. Arguments broke out between strangers. Phones were held high, recording every second. The chaos was total. The studio had turned into a screaming match with security guards moving closer to the stage. Barron couldn't stay quiet anymore. He ripped his arm free from Ivanka's grip and stepped forward, pointing straight at Andy. "You planned this whole ambush from the beginning, didn't you?" he shouted, his voice shaking with anger. "You didn't invite us here for an honest conversation. You brought old clips, secret witnesses, and fake papers just to create a circus and boost your ratings. This isn't journalism. This is a cheap setup." Andy tried to cut in, but Barron kept firing. "If you really had solid proof, you would have shown everything at once instead of playing these games one by one. You're using my family's pain for entertainment. That's all this is. A show to make money off our name." The verbal duel was intense and raw. Barron stood tall, breathing hard, refusing to back down, even though his hands were still shaking. Andy stayed seated, but his smile had disappeared. He looked genuinely surprised by how fiercely the teenager was fighting back. Right in the middle of the shouting, Melania finally broke down. She had been trying so hard to stay composed all night, but now her shoulders started shaking. Tears filled her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "Enough," she whispered at first. Then louder, her voice cracking open like something fragile that had been held together too long. "This is too much. I can't do this anymore." Ivanka spun around fast, still holding Melania's wrist. But instead of comforting her, she turned her fury directly at her. "Don't you dare fall apart right now," Ivanka snapped, her voice loud and desperate. "You're supposed to stay strong for us. Stop acting weak in front of all these cameras." The two women started arguing openly on stage. Ivanka yelled, "You always disappear when things get hard. You leave me to handle everything." Melania shot back, her voice shaking. "I never asked for any of this. I never wanted this life." Their public fight made the studio even louder. People were screaming, some cheering the drama, others begging them to stop. The chaos had reached a level that felt dangerous. Security stood at the very edge of the stage, ready to move. Barron stood right in the middle of the storm, watching his sister and mother tear into each other while the old clips of his father still played silently on the giant screens behind him. His heart was pounding so hard, the room seemed to pulse with every beat. Everything he thought he knew about his family was crumbling faster than he could hold together. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that the night still wasn't over. The studio had completely lost control. The audience was in total meltdown. People were standing, screaming at each other across the aisles. One side yelling, "This is fake news," while the other shouted back, "Tell the truth." In the middle of it all, a group of loud voices started chanting, "DNA now! DNA now!" The chant spreading through the crowd like wildfire until the words were shaking the walls. Security guards looked tense, moving closer as the energy turned wild and unpredictable. Barron stood in the center of the storm. Something inside him finally snapped, not into weakness, but into something harder. He stepped forward, away from Ivanka's grip, and his voice broke through the noise, loud, raw, and full of a pain that no amount of composure could contain. "You all want the truth? Fine. Let me tell you what I remember." The audience quieted just enough to hear him. Barron's eyes were burning as he spoke. "When I was little, Ivanka was the one who came to my room every night. She read me stories. She tucked me in. She stayed when I had nightmares. Mom, Melania. She was always busy, always traveling, always tired. I used to ask why Ivanka smelled like my mom, why she held me like I was hers." His voice dropped lower. "I thought it was normal." He paused. "But now it all makes sense, and it hurts like hell." His voice cracked hard on the last words. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. The entire studio went silent, shocked by the raw, unguarded emotion pouring out of the teenager who had been so composed all night. It was the highest emotional peak of the entire evening, the moment that turned everything that came before it into a fuse, leading to this single explosion. That confession lit the fire. Ivanka and Melania turned on each other right there on stage, in front of everyone. Ivanka's face was red with fury as she pointed at Melania. "See what you did? You let this happen. You let everyone believe you were his real mother while I had to carry the secret." Melania's tears were flowing now. She looked completely broken as she fired back, her voice shaking but loud enough for every microphone to catch. "I did what I had to do. You were the one who wanted to keep him. You begged me to play along because you were too young and too scared." Ivanka stepped closer. "Don't you dare blame me. You enjoyed the attention of being called his mother. You loved the spotlight, while I stayed in the shadows. You never bonded with him like a real mother," Ivanka screamed. Melania shot back, "And you never let me try." Their fight was ugly, personal, and completely public. The audience was in pieces, some cheering, some gasping, many still chanting, "DNA now!" Barron watched the meltdown happening right in front of him, his face pale but his jaw set with a determination that looked almost frightening on someone so young. He suddenly turned, pushed past the security guards who were trying to guide them off stage, and walked back to the center. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice strong and final. He stood tall between his sister and his mother. He looked straight at Andy Cohen, then turned to face Ivanka and Melania. "We're not running away. Not tonight. If this is all true, then let's settle it right here, right now. Andy, you say you have proof? Show everything. Ivanka, Mom, tell the truth. No more hiding, no more lies. We do this live in front of everyone." His voice dropped to something raw, something that came from a place deeper than anger. "I deserve to know who I really am." His words rang out clear and powerful through the chaos. The audience roared, some applauding his courage, others still screaming for the DNA test. Barron stood his ground, refusing to move, his eyes fierce with a mixture of anger, pain, and unbreakable resolve. The show was spiraling into complete madness. Security guards rushed onto the stage, trying to separate the screaming family members, while the audience chanted at the top of their lungs. Andy Cohen stood up for the first time all night, raising both hands and shouting over the noise, "That's all the time we have tonight." But nobody was listening. The credits started rolling on the screens, yet the drama refused to end. Ivanka was still yelling at Melania. Melania was still crying, and the crowd kept roaring like a living thing that had broken free of its cage. In the middle of all the shouting and flashing lights, Barron turned away from the chaos. His face was set like stone. Without saying another word to anyone, he walked off the stage with his head high and his fists clenched tight at his sides. He didn't look back. As soon as he stepped into the backstage hallway, the noise from the studio faded behind him, like a wave pulling back from the shore. Barron stopped for a moment, leaning against the cold wall, breathing hard. His mind was racing. This can't be real, but what if it is? All those nights, Ivanka was the one holding me, singing to me, protecting me like I belonged to her. Was I blind this whole time? A wave of anger and determination hit him so hard it straightened his spine. I'm not going to sit around waiting for more lies. I'm done being the last one to know. I'm going to find out the truth myself, no matter what it takes, no matter who gets hurt. If Ivanka is really my mother, then everything changes. And if they've been lying to me for 17 years, someone is going to answer for it. The scared kid from earlier was gone. In his place stood someone ready to tear everything down to get answers. Barron pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He dialed his father's number. The phone rang twice before Donald Trump's voice came through. Loud, concerned, already defensive. "Barron, what the hell happened on that show?" Barron didn't waste a second. "Dad, we need to talk, right now. I want a real DNA test, not some studio stunt. I want it done properly, with doctors I choose. And when the results come in, we're doing this again. Another interview, another show, whatever it takes. I'm not hiding anymore." His father tried to calm him down, but Barron cut him off cold. "No more secrets, no more protecting the family image. I deserve the truth." He hung up before his father could finish the sentence. He opened his phone's notes app and started typing fast. Names of doctors, labs he could trust, people who used to work for the family, anyone who might know something. He was already planning round two. This time, he wouldn't be the one caught off guard. As security finally cleared the stage and the studio lights began to dim, Andy Cohen looked straight into the main camera with a calm, satisfied expression. The screen faded to black, and one final line appeared in bold white letters. "Do you still believe Melania is his real mom? Or is the truth much darker?" The question hung in the air long after the show ended. Viewers at home were already flooding social media, arguing, speculating, demanding answers. Barron Trump had walked into the studio as a quiet, confident teenager. He walked out as someone ready to fight for the truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. And somewhere in the darkness backstage, the real reckoning was only just beginning.